With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halverson.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halverson, and of course, joining me as always, co-host Lorrie Boyer. Good morning, Lorrie.
Good morning. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. So I've been at the Almond Conference this week, and one of the things that just kept coming up in discussions, and in fact was a big part of the State of the Industry session on Tuesday, was talking about what to expect coming up, with the new administration taking office in January. And the topic of tariffs had come up frequently during the meeting this week, including during that State of the Industry. And also, I was just reading an article that came out in the LA Times, also in the Fresno Bee. I saw it in the Fresno Bee, and then it was originally from the LA Times, talking about tariffs that President-elect Trump has said that he wants to impose on imports. And the experts are all saying that these are going to be devastating, really, for California agriculture. This article that I was reading, in fact, said that researchers from UC Davis and North Dakota State University say that Fresno, Tulare, and Merced counties are going to be among the top 5 biggest losers in a trade war that would be spurred by Trump's tariffs. So, and ironically, those counties were all counties that went for Trump in the election. So a quote here in this article says, "Be careful what you wish for," because now the things that the president-elect is saying he's going to do could be quite devastating for our Central Valley growers. And that is, it is something that growers are paying attention to. I heard a lot about it, as I said, during the Almond Conference. And Lorrie, while I was there, I was talking with California Secretary of Agriculture, Karen Ross, and I asked her about it. And I'd like to just go ahead and play her response for us now.
The tariffs are very troubling because we know we're still recovering from the first round of tariffs from 8 years ago. Some of those were reduced, but many of them were not. They not only caused us in California ag to lose some markets or see significant decreases, which we're just now rebuilding, but they also, because of the retaliation, caused terrific supply chain issues and costs. Like, we have other costs and some of the materials we need, and I'm just thinking of people who were replacing vineyards, steel, wire, all those kinds of things. So it's a double whammy for ag. I also know that during the Trump era, they used CCC funding to distribute and try to mitigate the impact because Mr. Trump cares about farming communities. So it's too early to say. I am one that am always going to be about agriculture and the production of food, for me, should know no political boundaries or geographic boundaries. And I will continue to work in that kind of very bipartisan, working together, solving problems together kind of way.
So that, again, California Agriculture Secretary Karen Ross on the topic of tariffs and what it could mean for farmers here in California. And I think that we could be looking at some significant issues here, according, that's coming from the experts that I have heard from this week and previously as well. Are you hearing the same thing, Lorrie?
I am. And, it was interesting when Secretary Ross just talked about the indemnities back in 2018 and 2019 to help compensate some of the past trade war that we have been through under the first Trump administration. I actually was interviewing one of the leaders in Illinois not too long ago. A lot of the same type of concerns that you're talking about and that you mentioned. But what he doesn't want, and he was representing his farmer constituents, Illinois soybean board member, they don't want those indemnities. They don't want to live off the government. They don't want to have to worry about that. They don't want to get money that way. They want to get it off their efforts from the fields. And I thought that was a really good point, and one that kind of really resonated with me is not only the financial side, but how these farmers feel. They're out there working, putting their blood, sweat, and tears into every day, being optimistic, going through what they go through. They want the reward for their work, but not always as an indemnity. So I thought that was a kind of a cool point of view to bring up here, since you played that sound clip from her.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The farmers want to earn their money from what they're doing, from working the land, and there's a lot of pride that goes into that. And they don't want to have to take something from the government to make up for that income that they're not getting. You're absolutely right that that is a concern as well.
As we
There,
know, we both talked about here a few times the labor force that goes into this whole conversation as well, as California grows so many specialty crops that are still hand picked and hand harvested. We've talked about this a little bit. I mean, just the ramifications of what that will do to our workforce. In your clip with Secretary Ross, she talked about the supply chain, which we
Mhm.
talked about a little bit here as well, kind of in a different context, but still a big deal. We're still recovering from the past strikes and still getting out of the last COVID thing that went on with supply chains. So yeah, this will
Yeah.
hamper that as well, I believe, and just the quality of life, the communities that rely on these workers and the tax bases, and what does that mean at the grocery store for consumers? Those are just a few things that I think of top of mind without really even digging into some of the behind the scenes stuff, Sabrina.
Right. Well, the researchers went down and broke it down by county to see what the potential and the projected losses could be. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break here, but then when we come back, I'm going to read off some of those numbers from the researchers for the projected losses for California counties if this trade war does happen. This is the AgNet News Hour, and we will be back in just a moment.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halverson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We're talking about the potential for issues under the president-elect Donald Trump and the trade issues that he is saying he's wanting to put forth tariffs. And so there was this article that came out that talked about researchers from UC Davis and North Dakota State University that really broke it down by county and how this could affect counties in California. And in fact, the articles say that Fresno County comes out on top with a projected $983 million in losses in export sales resulting from a trade war. $983 million losses for just Fresno County. That's not the whole state. That's just Fresno County would lose if these tariffs, if we do have these tariffs like the president-elect is saying he will. Tulare County, $691 million in losses. Merced, $464 million in losses. And Kern County, $842 million in losses. The last one that they had is Imperial County, $213 million in losses, again, if this trade war does in fact happen. And those are huge numbers.
Those are incredible numbers. They're almost jaw dropping. I wonder what all they're factoring into those numbers. I mean, besides just jobs, are they looking at the whole economy and taxes and all those things?
Well, a lot of it has to do also with what, so for example, for China, if China does also impose tariffs, in retaliation, that would drive up the cost of the goods that we're sending over for Chinese consumers. Chinese consumers buy a lot of our agriculture, at their grocery stores. Well, now the prices are going to be so high that the consumers there won't be buying what we're sending over. So then China will be
Wow.
buying less from us as well. So there's going to be a lot of losses in our sales. So when we've got all these almonds that we're sending over to China or, other places, they're not buying them. What are we going to do with those crops too? So that's factored in there as well as a significant loss in sales because of the high prices imposed by retaliatory tariffs. That is, and that's a big concern, and especially, you know, coming off of my week at the Almond Conference and looking at how hard organizations like the Almond Board are working to make sure that our products grown here in California are successful in other countries, to have these tariff wars come in can really be devastating to those efforts.
Fewer workers, not only to get the crops out of the ground, but also just adding into the communities, the infrastructure, the fabric of a community.
Hmm.
And what does that look like on trying to get those workers back and trying to get the pipeline back in order?
Right, right. And there was more that Secretary Ross had said about the possibility of deporting workers, and she pointed out that even now, before it's even happening, that it can have a devastating effect just on families that are worried about it as well. They're bracing and preparing, and it can have an effect even before it happens too. So there's a lot going into it. Now, I do want to offer a little bit of hope, and I don't want to sound like that we're, bashing. We're just trying to point out facts and bring
Yes.
to light issues that could happen, and help, bring actual factual information into the story. But in his previous administration, or in his previous term, the president did listen somewhat to some advisors, and there were things that he had promised in that election process that he did not do because he listened to advisors. And so my hope is that, he does again listen to some advisors, and that they can work this out without all of this coming to fruition.
I am certainly not educated enough to really comment on this, but I almost wonder if like a stepping way of doing this, kind of incremental way of doing this instead of all at once. But it also is sad. And again, I don't know all the details. We report things. We have a certain amount of time to report things. We interview people, but it's gotten out of hand in the first place. So there should have been some controls on this. There should have been some monitoring of this before it got so far out of hand. And now he feels like he's handling business.
Right, right. And part of that too, I think that once it's said, it's something that you have to follow through on, and it was a big part of his whole campaigning, was talking about the tariffs. And these tariffs are really going to work for some parts of the country, not agriculture, but in other industry. These tariffs and what he's doing with tariffs can really benefit some other industries. The problem is the industry we report on, agriculture, is really the loser here.
Yeah, I agree. But to your point, yeah, manufacturing supplies and
Hmm.
also like microchips for computers and phones and even some of our newer technology, cars and machinery. Those are other things that I read that will be affected. Now, as you mentioned, he talked about this in his campaign and he had a pretty high number.
Hmm.
And now he has actually kind of come down in that tariff percentage. I'm not mentioning specifics. Number one, I don't have them right in front of me, but number two, it's kind of changing. So I hate to put that out here today and then
Right,
the next day it changes. But
right.
from what I've understood and read, several different sources and interviews, the tariffs that he originally talked about aren't actually as high right now, anyway, as what he originally intended. So I guess
Right.
that's a little bright news there too.
Right. And as Secretary Ross said, it's a little too early to tell. We'll have to just kind of wait and see how some things shake out. So we will do that. So with that, we do need to head to another commercial break. And when we come back, Lori is back with her interview segment. So we will be back in just a moment. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. She is Lorrie Boyer, and we'll be right back. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Live Earth, from what I understand, is celebrating 35 years in the industry. Tell us a little bit about how the company has evolved over those years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. 35 years ago, when we were promoting humates to do some of these things, such as nutrient use efficiency, at the time, fertilizers were very inexpensive, and some of these regenerative agriculture and soil building ideas were fairly nascent. They weren't embraced by mainstream agriculture and mostly encouraged by hippies and some of these environmentalists. So it's really changed in the last 35 years where nutrient use efficiency has become a big deal. And all of a sudden, these ideas that we were talking about the 80s that weren't very mainstream are quite in the main now. And I joke that we were cool long before we were cool. We just didn't know it. But the truth is, to be a leader and a visionary in this industry, it took 35 years for us to really realize that these products are needed and necessary for modern agriculture.
So, looking to the future, then, any new innovations, new products that Live Earth is working on that you want to talk about now?
The most interesting thing is the effect on these products on Western soils. Now, sometimes with a old product, a new application makes the product new again. And the one thing we're seeing is, particularly in Western soils with high calcium and high lime, that humates actually help react some of the sodium in the soil and make a beneficial use of the calcium that's already in your soil. We did some trials with the Tulare pistachio trial, and we saw the salts in that soil profile move. We saw them immediately respond to the application of the humic acids and the humates and mitigate some of the effects of those salts. So while these are old products, it's given farmers a new tool to combat some of their salt issues, which is an ongoing and continual problem in California.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Lorrie Boyer.
Today, my conversation is with Dr. Wayne Ayers. He is a veterinarian technical consultant on the Elanco Animal Health Beef Team. We will be focusing our conversation on bovine respiratory disease. Dr. Ayers, to get us started, what exactly is this disease?
Yeah, so bovine respiratory disease, or BRD as we refer to it, or you'll see it in print sometimes, is a very complex syndrome. It's not just one thing or another. It's that we have about 4 different viruses that are involved in various capacities, and then we have 4 different bacteria that are usually involved when we get the full-blown pneumonia. And that's kind of what people think of when we talk about bovine respiratory disease, is the pneumonia. Those bacteria are Mannheimia hemolytica, Pasteurella multocida, Mycoplasma bovis, and Histophilus somnus. So just so people hear those, they all belong in that BRD complex. It's a pretty costly disease complex to the cattle industry across the U.S. in all aspects. So cow-calf, stocker, backgrounder, and through the feedlot. We estimate that it costs about $1 billion with a B every year to the industry. That's performance changes in performance, added feed costs to get them to the same weight after they've recovered, treatment costs, labor costs, and the death loss. And so, right now with the price of cattle, if I lose one, it has to be spread out across the rest of the animals, that cost, and it's pretty substantial right now.
What kinds of signs do you see in cattle that have BRD?
Yeah, so it's quite a varied it kind of a little bit depends on when we see them, but in general, cattle are maybe be a little bit lethargic. Maybe you'll see some droopy ears, snotty nose, not wanting to come to the feed bunk, kind of standing off by themselves. You can have some increased respiratory rate, so sometimes they get to panting a little bit. That sometimes has to do with the disease process in the lungs, but also with a fever. So if we get them in the chute and we check their temperature, oftentimes they're running fairly high fevers, 103 all the way up to 107, and then sometimes if in severe cases they do end up having difficulty getting enough oxygen. So you'll see them do the mouth breathing, where they hold their mouth open and try and pant. I guess a good way to think of it is to just, as humans, we go through all these things as well. We have different viruses that affect us in our respiratory tree. So if you think of how you feel when you have a case of influenza, or if a person's ever had pneumonia themselves, these cattle are going through a lot of the same, they're feeling the same way. So if sometimes we can use that as a reference point and go, oh, hey, there's something wrong with that calf, right?
And BRD is pretty contagious, correct?
Yes, especially the viral portion of it. When they're shedding virus, then not all of them have to have a viral component, but they often go together. Just think of sending kids off to school, and the first week or two that happens, or especially kindergarten class, kids have never been around each other, and then you bring all these kids together, and invariably the first couple of weeks everybody's sharing something, and there's so the same thing happens with cattle. So especially at the feedlot level or backgrounder level, stocker level, where we may be sourcing cattle from different herds, different vaccination protocols. There's a lot of variability. Maybe some of them have been trucked on a truck for a long ways, and then we put those all together, and they start sharing viruses, pulls their system down, or maybe causes some damage down in the lung, and allows those bacterial components to come in, and then it just starts. It wants to move through the herd. Or at least that pen, if you consider that on the herd basis. So it is highly contagious. Things that we want to try, there are some mitigation things that we try and do, ahead of time, so we're not playing catch up.
Dr. Ayers, what causes BRD?
Well, like I said, it is a very complex syndrome. The reality is it goes all the way back to that mother cow when an individual calf is still in the uterus. As we learn more about fetal programming and epigenetics, we start to learn that, hey, we can affect how this calf performs forever, the rest of its life. Does that hold true on whether they run the risk of getting sick or not? And I don't think we're there yet to answer that question, but I think we're headed down that road. There are some researchers across the country that are kind of looking at a little bit at that angle, and we're a ways off before we understand that. But certainly we know that nutrition is a huge foundation for the performance of an animal, regardless the rest of their life. So if I take care of that mother cow and make sure that she has all the nutrients she needs and the minerals and the protein and the energy, that she can make good colostrum, the single most important thing in a calf's life, or its entire life, is a good dose of colostrum, high quality, high quantity. And so anything we can do to that mother cow to make that colostrum as good as it can be, that lays the foundation for that calf for the rest of its life. So now we get into the aspect of vaccinations. Can I vaccinate the mother cow and help improve the colostrum quality? Can I then, at turnout or branding or whenever we handle calves, are there things that I need to do there to help build that foundation and work our way up, to weaning time into the feedlot? And then as we learn more, making sure that things that we do not cause harm. So one of the things that we have to look at is reducing stress as much as possible. So if I'm, one of the most stressful times for a calf is when it's weaned and no longer with its dam. And so that's just that separation. There's a psychological stressor there that gets manifested in physical ways. So if we can wean on the farm and the group of calves, they wean by themselves, we reduce that stress. Now they grow there for a period of time before we take them to the next place, whether that's going through the sale barn. That's another high stressor because they're meeting lots of calves with very different backgrounds just as they go through that sale barn process. So vaccination at home helps protect when they meet those challenges. Not trucking things too far. Trucking is another big stressor because they're riding on a bus with people maybe they don't know, and not people but calves they don't know. You know what I'm saying? And and they get exposed to these different things in a confined space. So the longer they're on a truck, the more stress there is, the more likely they've already begun passing things around. At arrival at the feedlot, or when do we process, and do we process them right away? Do we process them later? And there's some different strategies that people use, but the point is nutritional stress, physical stress, and then social stress. All of those things go into risk factors for calves coming down with BRD.
The Ag News Hour will continue, and I'll pick up with my conversation here today with Dr. Wayne Ayers, veterinarian technical consultant with Elanco Animal Health. I'm Lorrie Boyer. I'm Lorrie Boyer, and welcome back as I continue on with my conversation with Dr. Wayne Ayers, veterinarian technical consultant with Elanco Animal Health. We are talking about bovine respiratory disease here today. Is BRD more prominent in one area of the country versus another, Dr. Ayers?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there may be slight differences in segments. So, the stalker industry, backgrounder industry, where they're bringing in young calves, putting them together and building groups, and then growing them up so that they can get to a phase in the feedlot. Maybe there's slight differences there on a little higher incidence in those kind of cattle, just because some of those have a higher tendency to go through a sale barns, where some of the ones that go directly to a feedlot, there may be some different marketing strategies that are used that, they're more likely to have one group of cattle in one pen kind of a thing at the feedlot level. So I would say no, not across area to area, but certainly there may be some subtle differences segment to segment. Yeah.
At what point do we need to look at antibiotics?
Yeah, so once we see that animal is that, it obviously has an infection, generally we put in an antibiotic, and there are some different strategies. So some of these high risk cattle that are coming through sale systems, maybe they're high stress, long haul, freshly weaned cattle. Let's say that would be the kind of the most extreme risk. Those cattle, a lot of times we use what's called metaphylaxis. So we assume that they are already kind of sick when they come off the truck, and it's often the case. There are individuals in that herd that are in that group, or they're more prone to become sick in the next couple of days. And so we'll go ahead and give an antibiotic on arrival. It's called metaphylaxis, and we know that decreases the incidence of disease, and it certainly decreases death loss. So that's one strategy, but that's kind of reserved for the high risk cattle. Once an animal starts showing clinical disease, then we implement. Some people use what we call a pull and treat. So now that I see the animal is sick, whether they had a metaphylaxis or not, then we bring them in and we use an antibiotic. We have 4 main categories of antibiotics, and so the idea is to try and choose between, or consult with your veterinarian, knowing what maybe type of bacteria I've had in the past. Are there certain strategies that I should use one before the other, or especially following metaphylaxis? We use a lot of telithromycin right now on metaphylaxis, because that market has kind of collapsed a little bit in cost. There's been a lot of introductions of some generics into the market, and so the cost of that has gone down. So there are some calves that have seen that. Now, what's the next best thing? Well, maybe the strategy is a fluoroquinolone. And so to that point, I'll just bring up that Elanco, we're just introducing a brand new fluoroquinolone into the market. It'll be publicly available sometime probably in February. It's the 3rd generation fluoroquinolone. So people know of Baytril and danofloxacin. Those are others in the category. Those are 2nd generation. We're the next generation, or even there's some maybe even be a 4th generation. But we're excited about that, and we think that'll help the industry quite a bit.
That was Dr. Wayne Ayers, veterinarian technical consultant with the Elanco Animal Health Beef Team. I'm Lorrie Boyer, and we will be right back with Sabrina Halverson right after this.
This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Live Earth, from what I understand, is celebrating 35 years in the industry. Tell us a little bit about how the company has evolved over those years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. 35 years ago, when we were promoting humates to do some of these things, such as nutrient use efficiency, at the time, fertilizers were very inexpensive, and some of these regenerative agriculture and soil building ideas were fairly nascent. They weren't embraced by mainstream agriculture, and mostly encouraged by hippies and some of these environmentalists. So it's really changed in the last 35 years, where nutrient use efficiency has become a big deal. And all of a sudden, these ideas that we were talking about the 80s that weren't very mainstream are quite in the main now. And I joke that we were cool long before we were cool. We just didn't know it. But the truth is, to be a leader and a visionary in this industry, it took 35 years for us to really realize that these products are needed and necessary for modern agriculture.
So looking to the future then, any new innovations, new products that Live Earth is working on that you want to talk about now?
The most interesting thing is the effect on these products on Western soils. Now, sometimes with a old product, a new application makes the product new again. And the one thing we're seeing is, particularly in Western soils with high calcium and high lime, that humates actually help react some of the sodium in the soil and make a beneficial use of the calcium that's already in your soil. We did some trials with the Tulare pistachio trial, and we saw the salts in that soil profile move. We saw them immediately respond to the application of the humic acids and the humates and mitigate some of the effects of those salts. So while these are old products, it's given farmers a new tool to combat some of their salt issues, which is an ongoing and continual problem in California.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halverson.
For this segment, we're going to be talking about a scholarship that celebrates and benefits cowgirls. I'm talking with Erin DeLong. She is the Durango Boots marketing manager with Durango Boot brand. Erin, thank you so much for joining. I wanted to talk to you about the National Day of the Cowgirl and the annual scholarship that Durango Boots does. Now, this is only the second year from what I understand, but can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, so Sabrina, we're so excited about this initiative that our team really brought forth a few years ago. So actually, it started back in 2021, the concept of it. And there was a National Day of the Cowboy holiday, but there really wasn't a day dedicated to the cowgirls or the women in the Western industry that I think really make our world go round, or who are the backbone behind a lot of great initiatives and companies and brands. And so seeing that opportunity, Carpe Diem, our team seized that opportunity, and we got it proclaimed through the National Day Archives. And so we earmarked the day, September 15th, beginning in 2020, to kick off the holiday. So every year on that day is when cowgirls, no matter your background, no matter your ethnicity, your age, you are celebrated. And so that's the beautiful part of it, that it doesn't matter if you're on the back of a horse, or if you're in a corporate boardroom, or if you do culinary or arts or own your own business. Cowgirls come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. And so that was the pinnacle and the backbone of our mission statement with National Day of the Cowgirl, is we want to celebrate these unsung heroes and these women who deserve a lot of credit. And it's how the holiday was really birthed. And so really since 2022, we've kicked it off every year. We partnered with some really strong brands in our Western industry that are female ran or female dominant, which has been a cool women's empowerment movement. And then last year in 2023 was when we solidified the scholarship aspect. And as we were really planning this holiday, our team put our heads together and we said, there needs to be a way that we're paying it forward or giving back to the next generation of cowgirls, though. And how do we sustain that? And so the scholarship was a no-brainer. And so through that hardworking process and behind the scenes, I'm so glad and fortunate that we've brought that to life. And so a scholarship angle, though, for those of you that may know that are going to be listening to this, there's a lot more behind the scenes that people don't realize. And so this was the first time we had embarked on this type of journey. And so we had a partner currently that we worked with, the Dude Ranch Foundation, the DRF, who's a 501c3 nonprofit. They already had a scholarship in place. So when I brought this idea to them, as a Western partner of ours already, they said, we'd love to help with this. So we run the scholarship with the DRF institution. So legally, everything is handled by them. But last year was when we first unveiled the $30,000 amount. And that is pretty eye-opening, because I think that kind of gets some people's attention, or at least some undergrads' attention. And so the scholarship, though, we really wanted to make sure it was pretty particular. And there's a lot of credentials that women have to have in order to receive this scholarship. But the $30,000 is going to be awarded to one either U.S. resident or Canadian resident. She has to be a freshman female, so she's in college, enrolled as a freshman in a 4-year undergraduate program, pursuing a Western affiliated degree. And that's a little more of a niche market there, but she has to have something that's going to pay it forward to the Western industry. And then those funds will be allocated over the next 3 years of her undergraduate studies.
Erin, I can't even tell you how much I love every aspect of this entire concept. First off, like you said, to celebrate cowgirls, which often are overshadowed by the cowboys. And so I love the idea of bringing them to the forefront and celebrating, like you said, the real backbone here. It's fantastic. And then $30,000, that is a huge amount for a scholarship.
It really is. And you wouldn't believe now the people, since this is 1 year's been under our belt, we have a winner already from the first scholarship. So we're now opening up for the second annual scholarship. But how many women now are coming out? Gosh, I wish years ago when I was going through my undergrad, pursuing being a vet or whatever it may be, this would help me immensely. And if I could go back, I look back at how much college unfortunately costs for a lot of people if you don't have a full ride. And really, that's going to make a really big dent in alleviating school debt that these women may have.
So, what are some of the careers that are incorporated with this Western type careers?
So a lot of it is ag related, ag business, veterinarian specializing in large animals. Again, it could also be, hey, I'm going to open up my own Western brand. There's a lot of my friends that have done their own apparel brands or anything like that's paying it forward to the Western industry. Again, from a corporate standpoint, you look at on the media side of things, being a producer to a rural media group. I think of kind of the Cowboy Channel, news anchors, women that are running that, or again, they're ranch hands or they're fifth generation ranch hands, or they're getting their family's land and farms and ranches passed down to them to run. And a lot of times you think of that, oh, maybe that's a male position or men are doing that, but we're seeing a lot more women now stepping up to the plate who are filling in those roles, which I think is very empowering and speaks volumes.
So I think it's very important to note that the deadline for applications is just days away. I believe it's the end of this month. December 31st is the deadline for these applications. Is that right?
Correct. We are getting right down to the wire. And so only a few more days left. You can visit nationaldayofthecowgirl.com. And actually at that website page, you'll learn more about the holiday. You'll learn more about our first annual winner, Caitlin Collins. And then the application itself is going to reside on that page. So all the information is there. Certainly don't get overwhelmed by the application. We do ask for a couple items needed for it, but we really want to make sure that we pick the right winner who's very deserving of that $30,000 scholarship.
We're talking this morning with Erin DeLong. She is with Durango Boots, and we're talking about their annual scholarship for the National Day of the Cowgirl. We will continue the conversation right after this. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson, and we will be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halverson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. I'm talking this morning with Erin DeLong. She is the Durango Boots Marketing Manager, and we're talking about the National Day of the Cowgirl and a scholarship that Durango Boots has put together. This is going to be the second year for the scholarship. It's for $30,000. That is life-changing. So, we talked a little bit about the deadline and what to expect, but what can you tell me about the first winner of the scholarship?
Our first winner of our National Day of the Cowgirl Scholarship is Caitlin Collins. And Caitlin is a Texas Tech student, and she's pursuing veterinarian, specializing in large animals. And Caitlin also is a part of the rodeo team at Texas Tech, and she's also Miss Texas Rodeo Teen as well. But Caitlin comes from a little bit of a non-conventional background with her family upbringing, and so evaluating her application, it was pretty evident that she was a very deserving young lady and all that she'd been through at a very young age and how she has put herself really in this position and started through college and seeing the financial need of how much this scholarship amount is going to help alleviate her school debt when she graduates. Because everyone knows if you're going into vet medicine or anything like that, it's not cheap at all. So she was a standout and resides in Texas. And we actually just honored her at the 2024 National Finals Rodeo during Durango's night with our stagecoach presentation We gave her physically there the $30,000 check, about a 4-foot big check she got to hold. And Thomas and Mac erupted when we announced it. So very deserving young lady, along with her family. They were over the moon, and it couldn't be more thankful to have Caitlin be awarded with this amazing scholarship.
Yeah, it is amazing. That is the right word to use for it. Just the lives that can be changed by that amount of money for a scholarship is amazing. You said it, and I also really appreciate, from a personal standpoint, that you included my career in Western industries. Those of us who provide agriculture news around the nation do appreciate that also can be included. And I know a lot of students or young people who are considering going into this field. It's not as expensive as going to vet school, I will say that. However, any college is expensive. So I will also be sure to pass it along to some of those students too.
Absolutely. Yes, we're planting that seed. So we're very optimistic that the second annual application process is going to be even bigger than the first one. So really we're at the tip of the iceberg right now, I think, with the opportunity that lies ahead within this program. I'm very proud of our team though, and this just really is making some sound waves in our industry. It's a large need for a lot of people. So we're one cowgirl at a time. We're going to apply this too, but who knows down the road what may transpire with this as it continues to grow.
And let's just say again, this is from Durango Boots that is providing this scholarship. I think it's huge when a company goes out of its way to really help its community like that. It's significant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're honored to do it. We want to pay it forward. The term of it's better to give than to receive comes into play here for sure. So we're very thankful that you were a small part of this and can make a big impact in someone's life.
So what was the website one more time for people to go and get more information and to apply?
Visit nationaldayofthecowgirl.com and information about the holiday, learn more about Caitlin Collins and who she is, our first annual scholarship winner, and then fill out the application right there on the website. If they have questions, you can submit an email to our committee, info@nationaldayofthecowgirl.com. If you have some questions between now and December 31st on the application process, we'd be more than happy to answer that. But we look forward to seeing all the future applications for the second annual scholarship.
And we've put all the information up on our website as well to try to make it easier for people to get to. That is agnetwest.com. There is a link over to the National Day of the Cowgirl website there as well. That is our show for today. I'm Sabrina Halverson. On behalf of Lorrie Boyer and myself, thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halverson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.